Ambassador Catherine Hayes stood before the Galactic Council, her hands trembling with barely contained rage. For 15 years, humanity had played by their rules. 15 years of suppressing instincts, of dulling edges, of pretending to be civilized by alien standards. You want to know why we agreed to your docility protocols? Catherine's voice echoed through the crystalline chamber. Because we were terrified of ourselves. We thought maybe you were right. Maybe we were too violent, too aggressive, too much. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their specialized atmosphere pods. They'd grown accustomed to humans being apologetic, restrained, almost timid. Then you took our children. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The Valthrine ambassador opened his mouth to protest, but Catherine raised her hand. 43 human children from the colony on Kepler 442b. Taken as biological samples for your research into Deathworld adaptation. You didn't ask. You didn't negotiate. You just took them. She tapped her neural implant, and holographic footage filled the chamber. Valthrine soldiers in power armor, stunning human parents, loading crying children onto cargo ships. The council had seen this footage before. They'd dismissed it as necessary scientific inquiry. We've been playing nice, Catherine continued, her voice dropping to something cold and ancient. We voluntarily limited our military to defensive operations. We submitted to psychological evaluations. We took your medications to suppress our excessive adrenaline responses. We taught our children to be gentle, to apologize for existing. She removed a small device from her pocket, a translator blocker. The aliens recoiled as her next words came out in raw, unfiltered English, a language that their translators had always softened, that their protocols had dulled. No more. The neural link to Earth Council activated. Catherine felt the weight of 8 billion minds backing her decision. The docility protocols, embedded in every human's neural implant for the past 15 years, began their shutdown sequence. You wanted to see what Deathworlders look like when we're trying to fit in, Catherine said, switching back to galactic standard. When we're medicated and monitored and leashed. When we're terrified of our own nature. She turned toward the exit, her security detail falling in behind her. Real security now, not the ceremonial guards they'd been forced to accept. She could see it in their eyes, that old fire, that edge that had been locked away. Now you're going to see what we look like when we stop pretending. Behind her, the council erupted into chaos. Emergency protocols activated. Defensive fleets were scrambled. But it was already too late. Humanity had taken off the muzzle. And the galaxy was about to remember why you don't steal children from apex predators. Captain Marcus Webb felt the docility protocol shut down like chains falling away. 15 years of artificial calm evaporated in an instant, replaced by clarity so sharp it hurt. All stations, report status, he commanded from the bridge of the UNS Defiance. His crew moved with newfound purpose. No more hesitation. No more second-guessing every tactical decision through the lens of appropriate response protocols. The neural inhibitors that had governed their aggression, their reaction times, their very instincts, gone. Sir, we're receiving similar reports from all human vessels, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced, and there was something fierce in her smile. Fleet-wide protocol shutdown complete. We're reading elevated adrenaline across all crews, but performance metrics are, sir, they're through the roof. Marcus knew what she meant. He could feel it himself. His mind processed data faster. His decisions came clearer. The carefully cultivated sluggishness that the council had insisted would make them safer had been a cage they hadn't realized they were in. Long-range sensors show Valthrine fleet movements near Kepler 442b, Tactical Officer James Park reported. Looks like they're fortifying the research station. Where they're keeping our children. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. But inside, something primal awakened. Not rage, rage was sloppy. This was colder, more focused. This was purpose. The Valthrine had made calculations based on docile humans. Slow humans. Hesitant humans. They'd measured human combat capability while humanity fought with one hand tied behind its back and weighted boots on both feet. Navigation, plot jump coordinates to Kepler 442b. Weapons, I want full combat loadouts. He paused, feeling the weight of what came next. And remove all safety limiters. The weapons officer looked up sharply. Sir, the limiters ensure we don't exceed Galactic Warfare Convention parameters. If we remove them. The convention assumes good faith between parties, Marcus interrupted. They violated that when they took children. Lieutenant, those limiters were designed to keep us playing fair with species that never had to evolve under a yellow sun's radiation, never had to survive ice ages and predators and plagues. He stood, walking to the viewport where stars streaked by in faster-than-light transit. The other species built their weapons based on their needs. We built ours while holding back, terrified of our own capacity for destruction. We handicapped ourselves. He turned back to his crew. No more handicaps. Remove the limiters. All of them. Across human space, the same scene played out on 1,000 ships. Weapons systems that had been artificially restricted suddenly accessed their full potential. Humans who had been chemically and neurologically dampened suddenly remembered what their ancestors had been, survivors who'd climbed to the top of Earth's food chain through sheer, bloody-minded determination. The Valthrine monitoring stations picked up the surge of human vessels converging on Kepler 442b. They calculated trajectories, response times, weapons ranges, all based on 15 years of data on docile humans. Every single calculation was wrong. The Valthrine research station orbited Kepler 442b like a metallic spider, all angles and sensor arrays. Security Commander Threll watched his displays with growing unease as the human fleet emerged from FTL. "They're early," his tactical officer observed. "Our projections had them arriving in 6 rotations." "Recalculate based on undampened human reflexes," Threll ordered, mandibles clicking nervously. The Council had warned all outposts, humans had deactivated their docility protocols. But the data was still coming in on what that actually meant. The human fleet didn't bother with hailing frequencies or negotiations. They just came. Defiance led the spear formation, and Marcus watched his tactical display with predatory focus. The Valthrine had 12 defense platforms, 47 automated gun satellites, and 8 cruisers. By galactic standards, a formidable defense. By human standards, unleashed human standards, it was barely an obstacle. "Target the defense grid," Marcus commanded. "Fire at will." The Defiance carried weapons that had been classified as excessive force by galactic convention. Kinetic kill missiles that hit with the force of tactical nukes. Laser arrays that could slice through hull plating in seconds. EMP bombs that could fry entire networks. All of it previously limited to 50% power output to satisfy Council regulations. Not anymore. The first salvo obliterated 6 gun satellites before the Valthrine could even charge their weapons. The second wave took out 3 defense platforms. The human ships moved with a coordination that shocked the aliens. No committees, no consensus building, just fluid pack tactics honed by millions of years of cooperative hunting. "Their response time is impossible," Threll's officer shrieked. "They're operating at 70% faster than documented capabilities." Because those capabilities had been documented while humans were medicated, Marcus thought coldly. While we were artificially slowed to make everyone else comfortable. A Valthrine cruiser managed to get off a plasma volley. The Defiance didn't even bother evading, its shields, now running at full capacity without the mandated, safe, restrictions, absorbed the blast like it was nothing. Target that cruiser, Marcus said quietly. Full power. The lance of coherent energy that struck the Valthrine ship didn't just disable it. It cut clean through, stem to stern, the metal glowing white-hot before the ship broke in half. The other Valthrine vessels immediately began broadcasting surrender signals. Ignored, Marcus stated. They didn't accept surrender when they took our children. Disable them all. It took 8 minutes to completely neutralize the station's defenses. 8 minutes of humanity showing what Deathworld evolution really meant when you removed the safety rails. Boarding teams, you're clear, Marcus announced. Secure those children. Anyone who resists, handle it. The Marines who maglocked onto the station's hull were different from the ones who'd served under docility protocols. They moved faster, thought quicker, and most importantly, they weren't afraid of their own capabilities anymore. Staff Sergeant Elena Morrison kicked through the station's outer door, her combat armor's servos no longer artificially limited. She moved like lightning, her team flowing behind her with the practiced ease of apex predators. They found the children in sub-level 7, in cells that made Elena's blood boil. But she kept it cold, kept it focused. We're going home, she told the crying kids, and her smile was fierce enough to make even the scared ones believe her. The Galactic Council emergency session convened within hours. Holographic representatives from 300 species filled the chamber, all speaking at once in a cacophony of alarm. High Chancellor Vexus called for order, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. The humans have violated 17 articles of the Galactic Warfare Convention. They used excessive force, ignored surrender protocols, and retrieved kidnapped children, Ambassador Catherine Hayes interrupted, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Children that your scientific protocols allowed to be taken without consent. The Valthrine research was approved by this council. Vexus protested. And that, Catherine said, is why we're done listening to this council. The chamber went silent. 18 species tried to speak simultaneously, but Catherine raised her hand. Behind her, the human delegation stood at attention, no longer the apologetic, careful diplomats of before. These were representatives of a species that had just remembered what it was. For 15 years, we tried your way. We took your medications. We installed neural inhibitors. We taught our children that their natural reflexes were too fast, their aggression too high, their competitive drive too intense. Catherine's eyes swept the chamber. We let you convince us we were broken. That we needed to be fixed. You were dangerous, a Xylar representative chittered. Your violence index was normal for a species from a death world, Catherine countered. Every single one of our excessive traits. They're why we survived long enough to reach the stars. You weren't measuring us against a baseline of survival, you were measuring us against species that evolved on planets where the weather doesn't try to kill you and the predators learn to fear intelligence. She pulled up holographic data. In 15 years of docility protocols, human crime rates dropped. But so did everything else. Innovation decreased by 40%. Artistic output fell by half. Scientific breakthroughs slowed to a crawl. You didn't make us safer, you made us shadows of ourselves. Better shadows than monsters, Vexus said coldly. Catherine smiled, and there was no warmth in it. You keep using that word. Monster. You know what's monstrous. Taking children for experiments. You know what's not monstrous. Parents coming to get them back. The force used was disproportionate. By your standards. Not ours. Catherine leaned forward. Here's what you never understood, we weren't dangerous when we were trying to play by your rules. That was us being nice. That was us desperately trying to fit in, to be accepted, to prove we could be civilized by your definition. She gestured to the data streams showing the Kepler 442b operation. This is us being efficient. Want to see dangerous? Keep pushing. A murmur of alarm rippled through the council. The Valthrine ambassador, his chitinous plates still rattling from the loss of his fleet, spoke up. "Are you threatening this council?" "I'm stating facts," Catherine replied. "You've spent years treating us like rabid animals that needed to be controlled. But you never stopped to wonder, if we were really that dangerous, why didn't we just take what we wanted from day one? Why did we voluntarily submit to your protocols?" The chamber was silent now, waiting. "Because we were afraid," Catherine admitted. "Afraid of ourselves. Afraid of becoming the very thing you said we were. We looked at our history, our wars, our violence, and we thought maybe you were right. Maybe we were too broken to be trusted." She straightened, and her voice rang with conviction. "But then you took our children. And you know what we realized? Our violence isn't a flaw. It's a feature. It's what happens when you threaten what we love. And that's not something to be ashamed of, that's called being alive." The Valthrine Dominion didn't take defeat well. Within a week, they'd rallied allies, the Score Collective, the Unified Hellion Front, and a dozen smaller species who feared what unleashed humans represented. "They're calling it a coalition for galactic stability," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported to Captain Marcus. 300 warships assembling at the outer reaches. Marcus studied the tactical display without emotion. 300 ships. By the old calculations, an overwhelming force. But those calculations had been based on humans who'd been artificially neutered. Current fleet status? 78 vessels fully operational. Another 45 can be combat-ready in 12 hours. Rodriguez paused. "Sir, we're outnumbered nearly 4-1. "Understood. Begin deployment protocols." What the coalition didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that human military doctrine had been developed by a species that regularly fought against overwhelming odds. Earth's history was written by the Spartans at Thermopylae, by the defenders at the Alamo, by soldiers who understood that numbers meant nothing if you couldn't adapt fast enough. The coalition fleet arranged itself in standard battle formation, a doctrine that had worked for 3,000 years across 100 conflicts. Organized. Predictable. Safe. The human fleet didn't use formations. They used chaos theory. "All ships, execute Alpha 7, Marcus commanded." It was a pattern they'd drilled countless times under docility protocols but never been allowed to execute. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. Too human. The Defiance and her sister ships scattered like water on hot steel, each vessel moving independently but somehow in perfect coordination. To the coalition, it looked like the human fleet was breaking apart in panic. Then the killing started. Human ships dove through gaps in the coalition formation that shouldn't have existed, that only became gaps because humans calculated trajectories 3 moves ahead. Weapons fire came from unexpected angles, targeting weak points that most species' tactical computers wouldn't prioritize: ammunition storage, not shields; life support junctions, not engines. "They're not fighting to disable," a Score commander broadcast in disbelief. "They're fighting to kill." Of course they were. That was the difference. The coalition fought by rules written by species that had never needed to develop total warfare. Humans had learned combat from a planet that taught you to go for the throat or die trying. Within the first hour, the coalition lost 40 ships. Not damaged. Not disabled. Destroyed. "Fall back," the Valthrine commander ordered. "Regroup at." The communication cut off as a human strike team materialized on his bridge. They'd used short-range teleportation tech that the Council had banned as too destabilizing. But humans had never agreed to that ban, they just stopped using it to keep the peace. Staff Sergeant Morrison stunned the bridge crew with practiced efficiency. Bridge secured. Transmitting surrender terms. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human Marines boarding enemy flagships, moving through corridors with a speed that artificial gravity couldn't fully explain. Deathworld reflexes, evolved under 1G, made them impossibly fast in the standard 0.7G that most ships maintained. "They're everywhere at once," a Hellion captain screamed before his ship went dark. The coalition lasted 6 hours. Of 300 ships, 47 survived intact enough to limp away. The prisoner exchange happened on neutral ground, a lifeless moon in unclaimed space. Ambassador Catherine Hayes walked across the dusty surface toward the Valthrine delegation, her breath fogging inside her helmet. "You didn't have to come personally," Colonel Martinez said through the comm. "Yes, I did," Catherine replied. She needed them to see her face. Needed them to understand. The Valthrine ambassador, a different one now, the previous having resigned in disgrace, waited with visible nervousness. Behind him, a group of human children in protective suits ran toward the human contingent. Parents broke ranks to embrace them, tears streaming despite the years of docility protocols that had taught them to suppress such emotions. "The children are unharmed," the Valthrine said quickly. "Fed, housed according to human standards. You don't understand what you did wrong, do you?" Catherine interrupted softly. The alien's mandibles clicked in confusion. "We followed proper scientific protocols. The taking of samples. They're not samples. They're children." Catherine stepped closer. "Let me explain something about humans. We're not rational about our young. We can't be. Our offspring are born helpless, stay helpless for years. So evolution gave us something you apparently don't have, an overwhelming, irrational, absolute drive to protect them." She gestured to the reuniting families. "You see that parent crying while holding their child? That's not weakness. That's weaponized evolution. Those emotions you think make us unstable? They're what made us survive when everything on our planet was trying to kill us. We were trying to understand Deathworld adaptation," the Valthrine protested. "To help other species. By taking children without asking. Without permission. Without thinking that maybe, just maybe, the species that climbed to the top of a Deathworld's food chain might have strong opinions about their offspring being stolen." Catherine pulled up a holographic display. "You want to understand Deathworlders? Here's lesson 1, we're cooperative when treated with respect. We're reasonable when engaged in good faith. We'll go out of our way to avoid conflict if there's another option." She changed the image to footage of the recent battle. "But there's a line. And children are that line. For every human, everywhere, always. You didn't cross a diplomatic boundary, you triggered a biological imperative older than civilization." The Valthrine was silent, his bio-readings showing something that might have been comprehension. Or fear. "The Council spent 15 years trying to make us less human," Catherine continued. "Medicating us, monitoring us, teaching us to be ashamed of traits that kept our species alive. But you know what? We're done being ashamed." She turned to watch a father spin his daughter in a low-gravity arc, both of them laughing. "We're aggressive because our ancestors needed to be to survive. We're competitive because resources were scarce. We're intensely emotional because that's what bonded us together when we were weak. We're violent when threatened because anything less meant extinction. And now you've removed the protocols," the Valthrine said quietly. "You've unleashed yourselves." "No." Catherine met his compound eyes. "We've remembered ourselves. There's a difference. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We don't want to impose our will on other species. We just want to be ourselves without apologizing for it." She started walking back toward the human ships. "Tell your council, we're willing to coexist. To trade, to share, to cooperate. But on equal terms. Not as reformed predators on a leash. As humans." 6 months later, Ambassador Catherine Hayes stood before the Galactic Council again. But this time, the chamber felt different. Wary. Respectful. Almost, deferential. The revised coexistence accord, High Chancellor Vexus announced, his crystalline form somehow less pompous than before. Terms proposed by the Human Federation, approved by preliminary vote of 287 species in favor, 13 abstaining, 0 opposed. 0 opposed. Because after the Kepler 442b incident and the coalition defeat, every species in the galaxy had done the math. Humans, when fighting at full capability, were force multipliers on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Catherine read through the terms one final time. Article 1, the docility protocols are hereby abolished. No species shall be required to artificially suppress their evolutionary traits to participate in galactic society. Article 2, Human Federation territory is recognized as sovereign. Any research involving human subjects requires explicit consent and oversight by human authorities. Article 3, the Galactic Warfare Convention is amended to recognize varying levels of proportional response based on species capability and threat assessment. She looked up at the assembled representatives. These terms aren't about human dominance. They're about honest coexistence. You've spent millennia building a society based on species that evolved in relatively gentle environments. That's fine. That's what worked for you. But you need to understand, and truly accept, that we're different. Not worse. Not better. Different. She paused, choosing her words carefully. We came to the stars hoping to leave behind the violence of our past. But we've learned that you can't separate the violence from the strength, the aggression from the drive, the capacity for destruction from the will to protect. A Xylar representative spoke up, voice tentative. How do we trust you won't dominate? Your capabilities are frightening. Catherine supplied with a slight smile. They should be. We frighten ourselves sometimes. But here's the thing about humans. We're pack animals. Loyalty is hardwired into us. Cooperation is our survival strategy. Yes, we can be terrifying when threatened. But we're also the species that domesticated wolves, that shares food with strangers, that cries at stories about fictional characters. She pulled up images, humans and aliens working together in research stations, human doctors treating alien patients, human engineers helping rebuild the damaged Valthrine stations. We don't want to rule you. We want to stand alongside you. But as equals. As partners who bring different strengths to the table. And if we threaten you again, the Valthrine ambassador asked quietly. Catherine's expression went cold. Then you'll see that what happened at Kepler 442b was us being restrained. You'll see what an entire species of Deathworlders looks like when they stop pulling punches entirely. When they stop trying to minimize casualties and start trying to end threats permanently. The silence was absolute. But it won't come to that, Catherine continued, her voice warming again. Because we've all learned something valuable. You've learned that underestimating humans is a mistake. And we've learned that we don't need to be ashamed of what we are. She stood straighter. We're humans. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We survived by being smarter, faster, and more adaptable than everything else. We made it to the stars by refusing to quit even when the odds were impossible. And yes, we're dangerous when pushed. But we're also capable of incredible compassion, stunning creativity, and unwavering loyalty. You wanted us to choose which part of ourselves to be. We're done choosing. We're all of it, the danger and the gentleness, the violence and the love, the predator and the protector. She looked around the chamber. So here's our offer, accept us as we are, work with us as equals, and you'll find we're the best allies you could hope for. Just never, ever forget what happens when you threaten our children. The vote passed unanimously. And across the galaxy, humanity finally took its place among the stars, not as reformed monsters trying to be something they weren't, but as humans in all their complicated, contradictory, beautiful, and terrible glory. The age of docile humans was over. The age of true partnership was beginning. And the galaxy would never be quite the same again.